Unbeknownst to humans, giants have been stealing their children during the night to eat them. However, after one little girl spots a giant in the night, things change. It's midnight in London, and a young girl named Sophie is making sure all of her orphanage's doors and windows are properly locked because this is the witching hour when people go missing. While Sophie takes all precautions, the shadow of something or someone large hovers across the town while the rest of the orphanage youngsters sleep. Sophie remains in her bed reading while the orphanage cat notices something and wanders out onto the balcony. Sophie follows the cat outdoors and comes across a massive man in the street. The giant notices Sophie has seen him, and Sophie hides in her blanket, terrified. However, the giant enters the orphanage and snatches Sophie, along with her blanket. The giant begins his journey out of town while carrying Sophie. He avoids being seen by others by using a number of devious techniques. After leaving town, the giant sprints over the countryside towards the cliffs, leaping massively with his huge legs. Finally, he takes a giant leap and lands in the skies. They arrive in a strange land where the giant carries Sophie into his house. The giant hangs Sophie in her blanket and begins chopping up some vegetables for a stew. Sophie tries to flee when the giant is not looking, but she causes a commotion that the giant hears. Sophie is approached by the giant, who informs her that she cannot escape until she obtains wings. Sophie inquires as to their whereabouts, to which he responds that they are in big country. Outside, more giants can be heard, as Sophie begs this one not to eat her. The giant chuckles and informs her that he is not a cannibal and would never devour her. Sophie claims he is a monster since he kidnapped her. The giant responds that he feels terrible about it, especially for her mother and father. Sophie claims to be an orphan, which means she has no parents. She asks the giant if the other giants are nice like him, and he replies that they are not. They would eat her up without a second thought. He also adds that compared to him, the other giants are massive. He is a runt in giant country. Sophie asks him why he brought her here, and he replies that he had to. If he didn't, she would tell everyone that she saw a giant, and he would be captured by the humans and put in a zoo. Sophie swears him she will not tell anyone and requests that he take her home, but he does not believe her. He claims she will now spend the rest of her life with him. Sophie threatens to flee if he doesn't let her free, and he warns her that if she ever leaves this mansion without him, the other giants will devour her. Sophie inquires about a jar with a blue light moving inside it, which the giant pulls out. The giant claims it's a dream, and Sophie claims that dreams aren't real. Sophie falls asleep while the giant reads her book. As she sleeps, the giant goes into a deeper part of his house where there are loads of jars with lights moving inside them. He grabs a jar with a red light and begins working on it. Sophie awakens to discover the giant asleep. She takes advantage of the opportunity to flee via a window. However, as she runs away, a much larger giant appears in front of her and captures her. Sophie pleads for rescue, but the friendly giant simply shuts the door to his cave home since he is powerless. Sophie is flipped up and swallowed by the gigantic behemoth. Sophie wakes up and realizes it was all a dream, given to her by the friendly giant to demonstrate the reality of dreams. The next morning, the giant is drinking a fizzy drink called the Frobscottle, and Sophie notices that the bubbles in the drink float downward as opposed to upward like they do in normal drinks. She points this out, and the giant says that upward floating bubbles cause nasty burps. Sophie argues that downward floating bubbles probably come out in a much worse way, but the giant doesn't seem to mind that. He lets out a massive gas that lifts him off the ground like a rocket, and he thoroughly enjoys it. Just then, one of the massive human-eating giants arrives, and the friendly giant hides Sophie to protect her during the tricky situation. Sophie hides inside a vegetable and very narrowly avoids being eaten. Following that, the friendly giant persuades the other giant that he despises vegetables and only eats humans. Following that, the nice giant takes Sophie into the depths of his cave abode and assists her in cleaning up. He gives her a selection of clothes from which she can choose a new attire. Sophie puts on a crimson jacket she found, and when the giant sees her, he gives her a weird, almost mournful face. Sophie asks him what's wrong, and he doesn't respond. He puts Sophie in a nice room within a tree and says he's off to do his job, which is to catch dreams. Sophie expresses her desire to accompany him, but he flatly refuses. Sophie looks at some of the dreams in the jars and sees them take form. She stubbornly insists on going with the friendly giant, and he finally agrees. They step outside of the cave house and find all the vicious giants sleeping. They try to sneak past them, but they wake up and grab the friendly giant by the leg. Sophie rushes and hides in a broken old car while all the vicious giants bully the friendly giant. They use him as a football and throw him around. Sophie can't believe that he is not standing up for himself. Suddenly it starts raining, and all the vicious giants run and hide because they hate water. The friendly giant puts Sophie in his bag and runs away. Unbeknownst to him, he has left Sophie's blanket behind, and the other giants smell it and realize he is carrying a human. Sophie and the giant arrive in the dream country, as the giant refers to it. Sophie notices that the stars overhead are dazzling. On a clear night, the giant claims that his gigantic ears can hear music emanating from the stars. He claims to hear insects talking in the ground, ladybirds walking on the leaves, plants and leaves conversing, and all the world's secret whisperings. Sophie notices the reflection of the giant tree in the water and sees that it is full of dreams. The giant says that at one point, somebody called him the big friendly giant. He jumps into the water and enters a different dimension. He asks Sophie to follow him, and she does. They both stand in front of the tree where all dreams begin. The big friendly giant notices a golden dream and says that it's a very rare type. He tries to catch it, but it continually escapes him. The dream slows down near Sophie, and he says the dream recognizes her. He adds that when he listens to it, he can hear her voice. He puts the dream in a jar, labeling it Sophie's Dream. Sophie assists the giant in capturing dreams till she comes upon a crimson one that is a nightmare. The giant takes the red dream and explains that it is one of remorse. It shows folks what they've done wrong and tells them there is no forgiveness. Sophie is dragged out of the other dimension by the giant, and they continue on their journey. During the walk, Sophie says that from now on, she will call the Big Friendly Giant, BFG. Sophie and BFG arrive in London, where BFG uses his giant trumpet to blow happy dreams toward people while they sleep. He narrates the happy dreams for Sophie, and she loves them. As they are walking back home, they see all the other giants going out to hunt for human children to eat. Sophie says they have to figure out a way to put an end to this. During this conversation, they also deduce that Sophie dropped her blanket back in giant country, and suddenly BFG's face becomes stern. Next, Sophie wakes up in front of the orphanage. BFG says that because they dropped her blanket in giant country, the other giants now know of her existence, so she is no longer safe with him. Sophie insists that they can stop the other giants together, but BFG tells her a story of how once he took another boy to giant country. The boy saw BFG just like Sophie did, so BFG had to take him. The red jacket that Sophie found belonged to that boy. After some time, the other giants found out about the boy, and BFG did not bring him back home in time to save him from their wrath. BFG concludes that he won't repeat that mistake with Sophie, and he leaves despite Sophie's protests. Sophie sits on the orphanage's balcony and chats to BFG, knowing that his enormous ears can still hear her. She claims she can feel him nearby and jumps off the balcony to urge him to show himself. BFG apprehends her. The two return to giant territory and devise a strategy to stop the other giants. Just then, the other violent giants come and begin searching the house for Sophie. In the process, they destroy BFG's work. Sophie narrowly avoids being discovered by the giants, and BFG finally decides enough is enough. He chases the vicious giants out of his home with a flaming rod. Meanwhile, Sophie is hiding in the room that BFG made for the last boy he brought to giant country. She spots a picture of the queen and comes up with a plan. They create a custom dream for the queen, which shows giants eating children and the army stopping them. The dream also includes Sophie and BFG. When she wakes up from that dream, Sophie and BFG will meet her, and she will be inclined to listen to them. They arrive at the palace and blow the dream toward the queen while she sleeps. The queen wakes up and tells the dream to her assistant, who says that it is curious because children have, in fact, been mysteriously disappearing across the country. As the queen's assistant goes to close the curtains, she finds Sophie standing there, and the queen recognizes her from the dream. Sophie tells the queen everything, and the queen believes her because she just saw it all in her dream. Sophie then introduces BFG to the queen, who awkwardly makes her acquaintance. The queen then notifies the generals about the menace of the giants while preparing a meal for the BFG. The lunch is awkward and entertaining because of his enormous mannerisms. BFG even forces the queen and all her staff and generals to consume frobscottl, which provides them with amazing gas. The royal army is then led to giant country by BFG. He conjures up a regretful dream for the other savage giants so that they will wake up full of remorse and be easy targets for the army. Sophie and the BFG sit and talk about Sophie's golden dream. Sophie inquires about the dream, to which the BFG responds that it is Sophie's dream of a regular life. He says she'll get it, but not here in Gigantic Nation. She'll have to return to her planet. Sophie questions if BFG will still hear her when she cries out to him, and he simply points to his big ears in response. The time comes to blow the dream toward the giants, and BFG realizes he's forgotten his trumpet back in London. When he's not looking, Sophie grabs the dream jar and takes it right in the middle of the sleeping giants. She is about to open it when one giant wakes up. Sophie manages to break the jar and fill the remaining giants with regretful dreams, but the first one remains lucid and normal. He is about to attack Sophie when BFG steps in and defends her. The giant prepares to punch BFG when the royal army arrives and stops him. The royal army captures and restrains all the vicious giants and proceeds to carry them away, finally freeing giant country from their terror. The vicious giants are carried to a remote island from which there is no escape. The only thing they are given to eat for the rest of their days is vegetables, and they are not happy about it. Sophie then awakens at the queen's palace and is greeted by her assistant. Meanwhile, BFG now has an entire country to himself. He is establishing a delicious vegetable garden and working on a book about his adventures. Back at the palace, Sophie greets the heir with "Good morning, BFG," knowing full well that BFG can hear her wherever he is, and he does. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.